Now, first of all, I changed the title yesterday because I had a couple of telephone calls with friends in Brussels and Berlin. My title was Last Minute Changes, but that implies that it's final. It's not. If you look at the wording of what the European Parliament has put into the directive draft, it's shameful. It is so lousy. They must have done it after 3 bottles of lousy red wine between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. It's really that bad. So let's see how the final one will look and when it will come. Yesterday somebody said not before 2029. And I don't know. My German colleagues think it's almost final. Creating problems. And Madeline, it was very impressive what you said about Romania, but also impressive how much progress you made, how much transparency you have put in the recent years. Now, if you think this is all very special and this is maybe Romania and some others, it's not. The worst situation for mandatory liability insurance is in 2 areas. One is New Zealand. They have no cover because nobody is willing to get a license for bodily injury cover. Similar to South Africa. The highest loss ever paid for one person was in South Africa. It was 380 million rand, which is about 45 million euro. It was a guy on a motorcycle who had a self-induced accident. It's paid by the state. It's not covered by the law. Another example is Arizona. The uninsured motorist in Arizona is 87%. So the most important cover is non-insured motorists, which you buy as an owner if you're hit by somebody who's not insured. So because you spend that money, you don't want to spend on your own liability insurance. So more or less, it's like an accident insurance. There is a state called Massachusetts where there hasn't been private motor insurance for 38 years until 7 years ago. And New Jersey is the same. New Jersey, half of the people were insured by the state because nobody wanted to insure them privately. So it's not so special. And having political influence, I like Proposition 13. This was in 1991 in California, governor's elections. You could add like questions for the voters to make a cross. We could do that for the European Parliament votations. And one of the questions was, do you agree that the insurance premium for MTPL will drop and the payments will increase in case of a loss? And you had to come back, yes or no. Guess what the answer was? So, so you can see it's not something which we have only in several countries which are considered maybe even third world to a certain degree. And if you look at the next country runner-up where probably private liability, motor liability insurance could be out of the market would be Russia. Because you can't make a profit with there. There's 1% penalty interest, by the way, per day. And lawyers can finicky up to, let's say, make the delay without that the insurer even knows about the claim for over 2 weeks. So he already has 15%, which is about what the lawyer earns. So, in all this environment, now we get this beautiful directive. Let's start with this claims history statement. And it's important to know we don't have a uniform European picture. I think what we have in Romania, because it's a practical testing already, because you have all those people who need it going abroad, it's probably the best practice which we have so far. Now, it's mandatory. So the question is, how will it look? And the European Parliament made it easy, and the legal committee endorsed it and said, we leave it up to the Commission, but they should consult with all the stakeholders before they have the final delegated act. Now, drafting something, having all the stakeholders in 2029, maybe a little bit early. In fact, I believe it's a good idea to have such a statement, because I've seen it myself also, that it's not easy to get insurance if you have documents from a different country. It's really, really difficult. So I think also a better communication of, let's say, process of that, maybe we with the help of the motor bureaus, could be a good idea. What is frightening is how much, using this start-in, how much they're putting in also into the pricing system, transparency, etc. So this language on the side of what it should be, that there should be a mandatory bonus-malus system in pricing. that there should be, this bonus malus system should be transparent. The pricing parameters should be set out. The type of claims should be set out. So there's a huge amount of things which run against the basic freedom of enterprise. Where that will end, I don't know. I'm almost convinced that we will have soon, again, almost something like regulated pricing mechanisms. So Romania is only maybe the start. Because politically it's easy, you know, you can request things and it comes in. And hopefully, like Croatia, which is trying to go a right way, also where the population has seen liberal rates is not good necessarily, because the differentiation compared to the former legal system is too big. There's three aspects, though, you should look. One, this big data pricing will not come into force. I think we will not see that it will be allowed as a pricing mechanism. And the reason is very simple, you will discriminate. I told before, a Piotr pays more than a Peter, and a Pedro pays more than a Peter as well. Less than Piotr, but more than Peter. So there will be correlations which you're not allowed to use. I don't have a definite answer legally. If there is a clear correlation, and no human being is doing this discrimination, but a program, will that be legally allowed or not? The key answer I got from all legal people, no, it will not be allowed. So you will not be allowed to charge somebody who is Turkish more because he's Turkish, even if there is a correlation. You're not allowed to charge a lady less, even though there's a correlation between gender and claims frequency. So I think this is rather more than other. And if I look at parameters which are forbidden in some parts of the world and which have the possibility of being forbidden in other parts, in all the world, is gender, ethical background, ethnic background, religion, age, education, income, residence. This is all things which are subjective, and I am very, very confident, and also when listening today and building it all together, I think this is something I would try to validate and maybe in some future speeches use. Telematics could be a way out, because telematics is individual. It is according to the specific drivers or vehicle and named drivers in this vehicle, and still so very individual, but it is not using parameters which are abstract and not allowed. We had just a couple of days ago official request from our Parliament committee to say, is there are older people discriminated by the rates? And more or less the answer was clear. You need transparency on what parameters do. And GDV said, we have very, very high, and we have a risk pattern by age. So older people, 68 and older, cause more accidents, cause more severe accidents. However, in general, their premium is suppressed by the bonus malus system if they had been good drivers before. So you could see this is like all fixed points. There is no room for things like big data having some abstract form of calculation. So, what is not bad, it's not bad to have this claims history, on the contrary. But the format and let's say, what it carries on into law, or tries to carry on into law, is overdone. Let's see how the final MID will look in that direction. I have the same problem. How come you didn't have one?
You should put it in a different direction.
No, let's.
I didn't have any problem.
Yeah, no.
Try something. Let me try something.
Chris, it doesn't like us too.
We'll be too long in this industry, that's fine.
Okay, good. So, type of motor vehicles. Yes, so the question is what type of vehicles are in there? There was a long discussion, and in Germany we just introduced mandatory insurance for Segways and e-bikes and e-scooters. Not a license, but just a mandatory insurance. And the directive more or less says there's no potential to cause significant damage in cross-border situations. Well, I'm not so sure. especially in vacation places where you bring it along. I have that in red on the bottom. So a place like Croatia or so, probably there will be cases. The second is not comparable with cars or trucks or motorcycles. Well, you have small motorcycles. I don't think there's a big difference between a very low motorized motorcycle and an e-bike. It avoids discourage innovation. Expensive and excessive insurance. Wait a second. It's excessive insurance if a victim of such an accident is compensated. That word really doesn't belong there, but that's what the guideline says. So in countries like Germany and France, we have private liability taking care of that, already like bicycles for a long time. And the density, or let's say the penetration of that insurance is 96% of the population in Germany. So everybody has that insurance. So it's nothing, for them it's nothing new, it's just an add-on as an endorsement. But that's something that should be done in other countries. Very important and very interesting is the definition of use of a vehicle. You mentioned the terrorism. By the way, the German view on that is a little bit different. The view is if the vehicle's specific energy and movement is used for a criminal act, like in Berlin, this would be motor insurance in the future, and should be motor insurance. But if you park a car with a bomb inside, or a truck with a bomb inside, so you just use it as a compartment, the specific dangers of a car would not be used, of a vehicle, therefore it's not covered by the motor insurance. This is the way the Germans would try to use it in the future. And I think it's not the 6 or 1 million. It is the places like Belgium or France or Britain where it's unlimited. And this would cause really problems for the reinsurance. And I think it will be very, very difficult to convince anybody that this is private market insurance. So it will be like the British, the Europeans would have to have some public cover, let's say at least the excess of 50 million. And you have to see if you treat anything coming from a car or truck, which is a terrorist act, anything like a dirty bomb, for example, as being also a normal MTPL case, the losses could easily exceed 1 billion. So we are not talking about something what was intended from the motor insurance. Otherwise, yes, it's more or less the best part of the directive's suggestion to say we have any use will be per se a motor loss, and only certain defined uses would then be excluded, like motor racing events, official motor racing events, if it's a pure machine. And there will be cases where, in Germany at least, we rely on the courts to define it. For example, if the passenger opens the door, after the car has come to a stop, this is MTPL, because it is in connection with the transport of the car, and that it has been just moving, and passengers is something very normal in this. So any dangers the passengers cause, which have in relation with the car, so opening the door would be covered. Opening the door after you have slept in the car, because you were too drunk to drive, and in the morning you had to go to the toilet, so you opened the car, this would not be covered. I think it would be a good idea to have some more very practical examples internationally defined or discussed. We have in Germany an annual meeting where things like that are defined, and it would be great to do that on an international level. And I could only urge, and I would help sending some cases from other countries, Romania and Poland, who are present here, so the biggest two countries in Central and Eastern Europe. Why don't you do that? Why don't you define, let's say, cases how you would think they would be defined? It would make a lot of ease for the insurance company. One big area, any place, sorry, it's also private driveways and parking garages. But two areas, that's why they're in red, it's hard to see how we handle that. This is loading and unloading of newly produced vehicles, or vehicles which come on a transporter and are brought to the showroom. So they're on the street for a minute, and you would have to have some some patch rule, because you cannot have a policy for each individual vehicle. Today, you know, it goes like this. You close your eyes. If it's within a private compartment where nobody else is allowed, let's say it is at the shore where new Volkswagens are put in to be put on a ship later on, or driven on a ship later on, there is exclusion of any private areas. That's okay, but how do you do the unloading with a showroom, for example? And last but not least, storing a car, in the Wu case, if you have a car stored in winter, or not licensed in winter, not insured in winter, and then your grandson grabs the car and goes driving, is that MTBL, yes or not?
Yes, of course.
No? And here, that's a big struggle. And the Germans more or less understand that this should be an MTBL coverage, so you will have an uninsured vehicle. If somebody does it without the one who normally insuring it will not be able to hinder it. Like grandson's 18 years old, grabs the car, grandfather has stored in the garage, and more or less snaps the keys against the will of the owner. Good. Insolvency, we had already said a lot, but I think one clear message. The cases we have seen almost exclusively are FOS or FOE cases. Very rarely we have any cash flow underwriting by a carrier. And here FOS should be clearly omitted. I think MTPL rules do not really fully allow what that means. Who, in what guarantee fund for this vehicle is any premium paid in? And on FOE, there should be more responsibility by the authority where the main insurer is located. And I've seen that in other countries as well. Small authority, small country, no connection to their local business, very uninterested about what is happening in other countries. And in the interest of keeping the possibility of having FOE, insurance subsidiaries, locations, because there is also good reason to do so, we should have also non-discrimination, because we've seen where the companies come from. I think the worst is, besides Denmark, is Gibraltar. In Gibraltar, we not only have motor, we also had lawyers, solicitors in England, etc., and others. So in order not to, let's say, discriminate locations like Gibraltar, it could be also Central and Eastern European countries, like Romania. I mean, with Astra and Carpatica, you have two very big ones, relatively big ones who did these services. So to really, really do something there and have a good control. The legal committee text is also interesting. What is after this? What will be the next one? Huh? So in 5 years, in particular, the expediency of this directive with regards to autonomous and semi-autonomous vehicles will be assessed, and the regime of liability, or whether a new strict liability offense should be introduced, relating also to product liability. So the European level has already said what's the next discussion point. I think that's okay, but it shows where they see the importance. So, I'm done. Empty page, no other comments. Thank you.